Welcome to Wicked Tales Unfold, where fear takes form and the unknown becomes reality. But before we start, if you want more amazing stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Also, if possible, share this video with your friends. Now, without wasting any more time, let's begin with the stories. The House That Eats Memories. The gray clouds hung low over the town of Eldridge, casting a suffocating shadow as the Harrington family pulled into the long, winding driveway of Thornfield Manor. The mansion loomed before them, a towering structure of brick and ivy, its once grand facade now weathered and worn. Despite its eerie appearance, the family felt a strange sense of excitement. They had always dreamed of living in a historic home. Kate, the mother, swept her gaze across the sprawling property, the gardens now overgrown with weeds and tangled vines. "It just needs a little love," she assured her husband, Tom, squeezing his hand as they stepped out of the car. Their two children, Lily and Noah, scampered out, wide-eyed and bubbling with enthusiasm, completely unfazed by the house's disquieting presence. As they began unpacking, the air felt thick with silence. The creaks of the floorboards echoed throughout the halls like whispers, and the shadows stretched in strange patterns, flickering in the fading light. It wasn't long before odd things started happening. Kate misplaced her keys, usually resting on the kitchen counter, only to find them days later inside the old grandfather clock. Tom forgot his most cherished childhood memory of fishing with his grandfather, a moment that used to bring a smile to his face. And Lily, once passionate about her sketching, suddenly couldn't remember what her favorite color was. In the beginning, these lapses felt innocuous. Just the effects of moving, Tom said, trying to soothe their collective unease. The family brushed off the growing sense of forgetfulness, attributing it to the stress and chaos of settling into a new home. But as days turned into weeks, the peculiarities escalated. Noah, who had spent every summer playing soccer with his friends, slowly lost interest, no longer recalling the excitement of those sun-soaked afternoons. He spent hours tracing through the dusty corners of the mansion, peering into cabinet doors that creaked ominously. Each time he ventured into a new room, it felt as if the house watched him, silently absorbing him into its twisted depths. One evening, after an exhausting day of unpacking, Kate rummaged through boxes in search of the family photo album. Frustrated, she asked, "Tom, where's that album from our trip to the Grand Canyon?" Tom furrowed his brow, the haze of forgetfulness clouding his mind. The trip felt like a mirage, shimmering but never fully materializing. I don't think we went there," he replied, confusion draping over both their faces. "What do you mean? It was just last summer," Kate protested, but the harder she tried to remember, the further it slipped. As days continued to melt into one another, their memories thinned like gasping clouds. Each morning, it felt as though Thornfield Manor consumed another piece of their past, leaving behind an unsettling void. They wandered through the house in a daze, navigating through rooms that should have been familiar but instead felt like strange labyrinths of loss. It was Noah who first saw it, a shadow flickering at the edge of his vision, darting down the hallway. Drawn by an inexplicable pull, he followed it to a decaying door at the end of the hall. The door creaked open, revealing an attic filled with forgotten relics. Dust motes danced in the dim light as he stepped cautiously inside. Within the attic, Noah discovered an old, ornate mirror adorned with carvings that seemed to writhe under the touch of light. As he moved closer, he gasped at his reflection. The boy staring back at him was unfamiliar, a stranger's face wearing his clothes. Panic surged through him as he realized how deeply he had been changed, how intertwined he was becoming with the house. Finally, one stormy night, as the wind howled outside and rain battered the windows like furious fingers, Kate felt the urge to confront Thornfield Manor. She gathered her family in the living room, a place once bursting with laughter and warmth but now felt cold and oppressive. "We need to leave," she started, her voice teetering between resolution and despair. "The house it's taking us." Noah's eyes widened with fear, but Tom's expression hardened in defiance. "We can't just abandon it. This is our home now. We can't let it win." But as their debate raged, the shadows in the room thickened, spiraling out from the corners of the dimly lit space. They seemed to weave themselves into the fabric of their discussion, whispering arguments back and forth as the air grew drier, heavier. It was as if the mansion was listening, waiting. In that moment, Kate made a choice. Look at us. We are losing ourselves. Her voice rose above the mounting tension. We can't let it take our memories. We must break free. With a shared understanding, the family rose together, hand in hand, united in their fight against the encroaching darkness. They rushed through the hallways, guided by a flickering light that pulsed like a heartbeat, leading them to the attic once more. They huddled around the mirror, a window to the twisted depths of their own memories. If we can just remember, Tom urged desperately. If we can remember who we are, we can take back what it's stolen from us. With a collective scream, they turned their backs to the looming shadows and faced the reflection. They shared their memories, the laughter of family picnics, the warmth of summer evenings, the simple beauty of togetherness. With every shared recollection, the shadows shrank back, shriveling in the light of their united bond. The attic shook with rage, the mirror splintering as the power binding their memories broke. With a final, desperate push from the family's resolve, the room erupted in a storm of color and light, consuming the shadows before it exploded. Time and space seemed to collapse around them as the shadows dissipated into the ether. As the morning light spilled through the window the next day, the Harringtons stumbled out from a sea of dust, breathless but whole. They looked around, eyes wide with a new clarity. The bustling memories began to flow back in, a cacophony of laughter, celebrations, and tears. They had faced the specter of oblivion, and they had won. Together, they stepped outside into the sun-drenched garden of Thornfield Manor. With the mansion's hold broken, the air felt lighter, the shadows lifted. Their new home now stood before them, not as a vessel of looming loss, but as a canvas of potential, ready to be filled with the memories they would create together. And perhaps, they mused, the most essential memories had always been there, waiting to be brought to light. Let's get to another story. The Lake of Eyes. The sun dipped below the horizon as Lucas, Maya, Raj, and Emma set up camp by Lake Sereth. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine trees and the distant sound of water lapping at the shore. As they pitched their tents and gathered firewood, laughter filled the air. Eager to escape the pressures of university life, they were ready for a weekend of adventure, if only they had paid heed to the warnings about the lake. Do you really believe all that nonsense about Lake Sereth being haunted? Raj scoffed, tossing a log onto the growing fire. Tales of ghostly apparitions and strange creatures had lingered among the townsfolk, but the group dismissed them as old folklore. We're not scared, right? Emma grinned, her bright smile lighting up the fading twilight. Of course not, Maya chimed in, her voice teasing but with a hint of apprehension. Besides, what could possibly happen to four brave campers? As the sky deepened into a canvas of stars, they settled around the fire, sharing ghost stories and teasing each other about the lake's ominous reputation. The flickering flames threw shadows that danced around them, and with every story, the chill in the air wrapped tighter around their bones. But as the moon rose, casting a silver glow over the water, an uneasy feeling crept into the depths of their hearts. Lucas glanced over at the lake, its surface was unnaturally still. They continued to laugh and joke, but in the back of their minds, a thrill of fear began to pulse. Later that night, as laughter faded and their voices turned into yawns, Raj decided to take a stroll to the lakeshore. Just calling the creepy spirits to join me, he joked, walking away with a wave. The others rolled their eyes, but a part of them felt compelled to follow. As they approached the water, the air grew dense, almost electric. They stood in front of the lake, its dark depths seemed to absorb the moonlight. Suddenly, they noticed something strange. Hundreds of small, luminous eyes glimmered just below the surface, watching them intently. Guys, Emma whispered, taking a step back. The eyes blinked in unison. Probably just fish, Raj chuckled nervously, though his voice lacked conviction. The fire crackled behind them, but the warmth of it seemed far away. So they stood, transfixed. Let's get out of here, Maya finally said, nervously twisting a strand of hair around her finger. The group turned to leave, but as they stepped back, a force pulled at their ankles. What the? Lucas shouted as he stumbled, falling backward. Something cold, slippery, and strong was dragging him towards the water. Grab him, Emma screamed, lunging at her friend, but she too felt the grip of unseen tendrils pulling her toward the lake. Raj and Maya reached for them, but it was as if the shadows around the lake had come alive, snaking out to ensnare them. Panicking, they grasped each other's hands, pulling with all their might. "Run!" Raj yelled, but the invisible force grew stronger, a primordial whisper echoing in their minds, luring them closer to the water's edge. With an unbearable effort, they finally managed to break free for a fleeting moment. They sprinted back to the campsite, the shadows retreating slightly but not releasing their grip completely. The fire snapped violently as they reached it, flickering against the encroaching darkness. "What the hell was that?" Lucas gasped, panting heavily. His face was pale, eyes wide with disbelief. Emma held onto him tightly, her voice trembling. "We need to leave, now." "No," Maya insisted, her eyes darting to the trees. "We can't just leave. Something is trying to get us, something in the water. We can't go back." As if punctuating her words, the eyes re-emerged, emerging from the depths, hundreds of them, swirling and glowing in a sinister rhythm. The darkness stretched out like fingers, reaching for them. No matter how far they ran, the grip of fear kept tugging them back, wrapping around them like a fog. In a desperate bid, Raj grabbed a lantern from their sight and swung it toward the lake. "Stay back," he shouted, illuminating the water. To their horror, they saw ghostly figures forming just beneath the surface, faces of those who had wandered too close in the past, twisted in agony, trapped in the lake's depths. The friends exchanged terrified glances. They needed to act if they were going to survive the night. "We have to work together," Lucas urged, his voice steadying as he fought against the terror consuming them. "Whatever's in there wants us. We need to find a way to break its hold." They formed a circle, hands clasped tightly, their breaths shallow but resolute. With every ounce of their courage, they shouted into the night, "We won't be yours." The chants grew louder, filling the cold air, resonating against the lake. As their combined voices echoed across the surface, the eyes dimmed, the spectral figures began to recede, and the water churned with a malevolent rage. The shadows that had pulled at them slackened, if only for a moment. "Now!" Maya screamed. They turned and ran, plunging into the forest, ignoring the thorns that snagged at their clothes and skin. Behind them, the haunted whispers faded, the pull of the lake growing weaker as morning light began to kiss the treetops. They didn't stop until they reached the safety of the main road, collapsing into a heap of limbs and laughter that was buoyed by sheer relief. They had escaped, the lake and its secrets left behind. But as they looked back, Lake Sereth gleamed coldly in the dawn light, its depths still harboring the eyes that watched, waiting for the next weekenders drawn by curiosity, unknowing of the dark legacy that bubbled below the surface. Let's get to another story. The Doll's Revenge. Claire had always been haunted by her past. Growing up in a small town, her greatest companion had been a frayed doll named Lucinda. She had poured every secret into Lucinda's stitched smile and tangled hair. But as the years rolled on and Claire entered her teens, the doll became a reminder of childhood innocence she desperately wanted to shed. One rainy afternoon, tired of being teased by her friends, Claire made the fateful decision to throw Lucinda away. She watched the garbage truck take her old friend off, not giving a second thought to her action, eager to embrace the adult world that awaited beyond childhood. Years passed, and Claire moved to a new city, seeking a fresh start among the high-rise buildings and bustling streets. Her apartment was small but cozy, decorated with modern furnishings that silently spoke of her newfound maturity. Claire was in her late 20s, but despite her designer clothes and trendy makeup, a lingering shadow of guilt remained from that childhood decision, one that manifested itself in dark dreams of a girl with mismatched eyes watching her from the corner of a room. One evening, after a long day at work, Claire returned home and dropped her bags by the door. She collapsed onto the sofa with a sigh, scrolling mindlessly through her phone. As she prepared to go to bed, she noticed something out of place. On her bedroom chair, a soft but undeniable outline of a familiar figure lay draped over, a doll that looked strikingly like Lucinda. Stricken with confusion, Claire brushed it off. It must have been a trick of her tired mind. As the nights trickled on, Claire began discovering the doll at increasingly sinister locations. Night after night, it appeared closer to her bed, each time adorned with subtle changes. The first night, there was a smudge of dirt on its cheek. The next, its head was tilted unnaturally, as though it had its own thoughts. By the fourth night, Claire awoke to the feeling of something watching her. The moonlight spilled across her bedroom, illuminating not only Lucinda but also the way the doll's eyes seemed to glint with malevolence. Panic gripped her chest as she stumbled out of bed. She shook her head, trying to convince herself it was just a nightmare as she grabbed the doll and tossed it into her closet. But that night, she woke up to the soft creaking of her closet door slowly swinging open. The doll was gone. Claire sat up, dread pooling in her stomach. Her heart raced as she scanned the room, prying her eyes away from the closet door, and then she saw it, a shadow sitting at the foot of her bed. Lucinda, with a twisted smile and eyes that now seemed to glow with vindictive glee, watched her. No, 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 Claire gasped, scrambling backward against her headboard. Then the whispers began, soft yet taunting. You threw me away, Claire. You forgot me. Tears slipped down Claire's cheeks as she begged for forgiveness, her words a choked murmur. I was just a child. It was just a doll. Just a doll, Lucinda echoed, cocking her head as if mulling over Claire's words. You didn't think I would let you go that easily, did you? With a chilling finesse, Lucinda began to inch closer across the floor, moving with a jerky, unnatural rhythm that felt all too real. Clenching her fists, Claire flung herself out of bed and raced to the living room, her breath shallow with fear. She had to escape. She had to find a way to rid herself of it once and for all. Desperately, she grabbed a box, heaved open the front door, and stuffed Lucinda into it, swearing to herself that she would take the doll far away and bury it deep. But before she could close the box, an icy wind whispered through her apartment. The lights flickered, and Claire staggered back as Lucinda launched herself out, a whirlwind of fabric and malevolence. Running won't save you, she hissed, her voice a cacophony of the innocence Claire once cherished, twisted by abandonment. You made me suffer, now, it's your turn. The doll lunged forward, and Claire stumbled, feeling a dark energy wrap around her. She closed her eyes, her heart pounding, and in that moment, understanding washed over her. Lucinda wasn't just a doll. She was a monument to Claire's unresolved guilt and the undeniable bond Claire had broken. I'm sorry, Claire shouted. I never meant to hurt you. The darkness paused, feathering around her, giving her a moment of hesitation. Slowly, the vicious aura began to shift. Lucinda's features softened, the anger melting away. It hovered before Claire, teetering on the brink of revenge and forgiveness. As if in a trance, Claire knelt on the floor and placed her hands on the box, staring directly at her old friend, tears spilling down her cheeks. I shouldn't have thrown you away. I should have kept you close. I've missed you. The doll flinched, uncertainty washing over it. Claire waited, her heart quaking with vulnerability. After what felt like an eternity, Lucinda began to diminish before her eyes, the malevolent energy falling away like forgotten memories. Claire wiped her tears, feeling a strange warmth envelop her despite the night's horrors. Lucinda wasn't just a doll. She was a part of Claire's history, a reminder of the importance of love and the bonds we share, even when we think they are trivial. And in that moment, Claire grasped the box tightly and whispered, "You will always be my friend." The darkness vanished entirely, leaving Claire in an enveloping silence. She dared to look inside the box. Lucinda lay still, unassuming once more. Determined to make amends, Claire pulled the doll from the box, cradling it tenderly in her arms. From that day onward, Lucinda took her place back on the shelf, her place of honor, where she belonged, lovingly restored and eternally cherished. Every night after, Claire whispered her secrets to Lucinda, and never again was she alone. Let's get to another story. The Collector's Cabin. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an orange glow over the dense trees of Cedar Hollow. Jake had set out that morning, eager to drink in the solitude of nature, only to find himself deeper in the woods than he intended. The trail he had followed had gradually faded into thickets of underbrush, twisting and turning as though the forest itself conspired to mislead him. Now, as shadows lengthened, panic began to knot in his stomach like a heavy stone. He stumbled along a narrow path, his breath catching in his throat as the trees seemed to whisper, their limbs rustling with secrets. Just as he was ready to turn back, a structure emerged through the foliage, a weathered cabin, almost swallowed by ivy and wildflowers. Its wooden walls were rotting in places, and the roof sagged like an old man's shoulders. Curiosity outweighed caution, and he approached it slowly, heart fluttering in his chest. The door creaked open at his touch, revealing a dimly lit interior. Dust motes danced in the air, and the scent of mildew mingled with something faintly metallic. The floor was cluttered with objects, bizarre relics that seemed to be plucked from different eras and places. Shelves lined the walls, each filled with eerie artifacts: a rusted compass, a faded photograph of a laughing girl, a battered journal yellowed with age. Each item seemed oddly heavy, as if burdened by the stories they held. Jake picked up a small trinket, a delicate locket. It was cold to the touch, and when he opened it, he saw a faded portrait of a woman with hauntingly familiar features. Hadn't he seen her picture in the local news? A missing persons report. He felt a shiver crawl down his spine. One by one, he examined the items. A child's teddy bear with one button eye, a gold ring inscribed with a date. Both had belonged to people whose faces flitted across his mind, news segments he'd watched and articles he'd read. Each relic was a pulse of a lost life, a breathtaking reminder of those who had vanished into thin air. Suddenly, a noise interrupted his reverie. He turned sharply. The cabin's door swung shut on its own, sealing him in. The air felt heavier, charged with an energy that made the hair on his arms stand on end. Then, from the corner of his eye, he caught movement, a figure lurking in the shadows. "Who's there?" Jake called, but only the echo of his voice returned. The figure slipped into view, a transparent silhouette of a young man, his eyes wide with terror. Jake stumbled backward, colliding with a shelf. The young man raised a trembling finger, pointing at the collection of relics surrounding them. "Each piece tells a story," the apparition whispered, his voice a distant echo, as thin as smoke. "We didn't listen. Now, we are trapped here, the next story's waiting to be told." A rush of cold fear washed over Jake. His pulse thumped in his ears. He realized then that with each item he touched, he was pulling himself closer to their fate. The news reports flashed in his mind, headlines of disappearances and family heartaches. He had stumbled upon a graveyard of memories and a curse he couldn't escape. I need to leave," he stammered, moving toward the door. But with each step, the walls seemed to close in, the relics whispering their pleas, begging for acknowledgement, for remembrance. "Not so fast," the apparition growled, a pained expression twisting his features. "You're a part of this now. If you walk out, another will take your place." Desperation fueled Jake's flight. He dashed for the door, but it wouldn't budge. He slammed his shoulder against it, his breath hitching. The cabin felt alive, its walls pulsing as if resonating with the unquiet spirits surrounding him. "Please," he shouted, his voice breaking. "Let me go." The specter's face softened, a flicker of something akin to sympathy crossing his features. "Listen to their stories. Remember us. Break the cycle before it claims you too." With a moment of courage, Jake turned back to the relics, his heart racing. He began to speak softly to the room, recounting the lives he could remember, the joy, the love, the loss. The more he shared, the lighter the air became, and the oppressive shadows started to withdraw. One by one, as he acknowledged the souls trapped within the cabin's walls, items began to dim, their power ebbing away. He felt the burden of their stories lift as whispers of gratitude swirled around him. At last, with a final breath, he pushed against the door, and it creaked open. Stumbling out into the open air, sunlight washed over him, warming his skin. He glanced back, the cabin standing silent and still, yet somehow less menacing, the whispers fading into the breeze. Jake didn't stop running until he reached the safety of the path where he had lost his way. As the familiar sights of nature enveloped him, he vowed to find those who had vanished, to remember their stories, and never to let them be forgotten again. The weight of the cabin's legacy lingered on his shoulders, a reminder of the thin line between the living and the lost, a weight he now carried with honor. Let's get to another story. The Mirror Maze. Under the glow of neon lights, laughter echoed throughout the carnival grounds, mingling with the intoxicating scents of popcorn, cotton candy, and fried dough. The air was charged with electric anticipation as families and kids explored the vibrant attractions. Among the throng of colorful tents and dizzying rides, a mirror maze stood like an enigma, shimmering, beckoning curious souls into its labyrinthine depths. Sebastian, a 22-year-old aspiring artist, approached the entrance, heart racing with excitement. He often struggled with feelings of inadequacy, yearning for a breakthrough that would allow him to express his true self. The mirror maze promised not only a diversion but an introspective journey into his own psyche. As he stepped inside, the world outside faded away. The cacophony of laughter echoed like a distant memory as reflections multiplied infinitely around him. Each step forward sent the maze into a spiraling illusion, a dizzying dance of light and shadow. Mirrors stretched endlessly, warping his image. A tall, thin figure dressed in a plain graphic tee, jeans whose knees were frayed by time, and sneakers drenched in paint splatters from creative nights spent in his cluttered studio. At first, he marveled at the peculiar forms his reflections took, each one offering a glimpse of a different facet of himself. One showed him with vibrant blue hair, his artwork displayed in an illustrious gallery. Another reflection peered back with a confident grin, swaggering like the models in magazines, unafraid and unapologetic. But amidst the intrigue, a darker version of himself began to pull at his attention. In one mirror, he saw a version of himself that was shadowed and sullen, eyes deep set with despair. It whispered his insecurities back at him in a voice reminiscent of his harsher critics, the ones who questioned his talent and urged him to abandon his dreams. "You know you're not good enough," it rasped, "just turn back now while you still can." Sebastian stepped back, feeling the chill creep up his spine. He pressed forward to escape this reflection but soon found himself trapped in another circular chamber, each mirror a new prison of his own thoughts. The laughter outside faded into a haunting silence that echoed within his mind. Just as panic began to grip him, he glimpsed another version, this one vibrant and alive. With tousled curls and a paint-splattered apron, it beamed encouragement. "You're better than you think," this version said, gesturing for him to come closer. "Embrace who you are. Art isn't about perfection, it's about expression." In a flash, Sebastian felt torn between the two reflections, one dragging him into despair, one lifting him into hope. He turned away from the shadow of doubt, resolutely deciding to follow the vibrant reflection instead. But as he navigated the maze, it seemed to change before his eyes, leading him deeper and deeper. The laughter from the carnival became muffled, replaced by the unsettling whispers of his doubt. "Why are you following that illusion?" the shadow taunted. "You know it's all a lie. You'll never be good enough." Sebastian's heart raced as he dashed through the dizzying array of mirrors. Glancing back, he felt the shadows close in on him, but the vibrant reflection was still within reach, bolder than ever. "You are the creator of your own destiny, Sebastian. It's time to wake up," it called, stretching an arm toward him like a beacon. With every ounce of determination, Sebastian chose to accept the truth his vibrant counterpart offered. "I am enough," he whispered to himself, gaining strength in those words. "I will not let fear govern me." Finally, he turned to face the looming surface of the mirror. As he stepped through it, the maze erupted around him, and he broke free from the oppressive collective of dark reflections. He stumbled into a clearing, panting but liberated, colors swirling around him as the carnival roared back to life. The light was blinding, but it felt invigorating. The reflection that had lured him through the maze lingered for a moment, smiling with a twinkle of pride. "Now you know. Embrace your journey," it said before fading into the shimmering surface. Sebastian emerged from the mirror maze, breathless yet filled with newfound clarity. He looked around, as the vibrant colors of the carnival blended into his mind, realizing that although sometimes lost, he would find his way back home, through the mirrors, through the doubts, and ultimately, right back to himself. Let's get to another story. The Phone That Won't Die. Marissa had always had a soft spot for nostalgia. It was a sweltering Saturday afternoon when she stumbled upon an old electronics shop tucked between a thrift store and a coffee house, its dusty glass windows offering tantalizing glimpses of relics from a bygone era. Inside, she spotted the old cell phone, a bulky flip phone, its screen cracked but still functional. It beckoned to her, a relic from a time when tech felt warm and personal. After a brief negotiation with the oddly cheerful shop owner, Marissa walked out with the phone and a sense of glee at her bargain find. She had no real intention of using it beyond the odd whim to play with a piece of history. She kept it tucked away in her bag for a rainy day. That evening, as she settled in with a movie and pizza, her phone vibrated. It wasn't the flip phone, it was her smartphone. Curious, she rummaged through her bag and flipped open the retro device. A message blinked on the screen, the letters garbled in a way that suggested they came from old technology. "Help me, please." Marissa froze, half expecting a friend to be playing a prank on her. She quickly checked her contacts list. No one she recognized was associated with that number. The message was likely an artifact of the phone's previous life. She shook it off, dismissing the message as harmless echo from the past, and went back to her movie. But the following night, as she lay in bed attempting to sleep, the old phone vibrated again. This time, there were several messages, each more frantic than the last. Can't breathe. Darkness is closing in. Find me before it's too late. Chills crawled down her spine, but curiosity gnawed at her. The previous owner, the one who had written these desperate messages, was clearly in trouble. She flipped open the phone again, fingers trembling, and replied, wanting to see where this would lead. Who is this? The reply came almost instantly. I'm Jenna. I need your help. They won't stop until they get me. Marissa's heart raced. This wasn't just some prank. It felt ominous, like an urgent plea from beyond the grave. She spent the following days trying to uncover the mystery behind Jenna. Each time she powered the phone, vibrations filled the air with messages filled with veiled threats and cryptic hints. They spoke of her final days, of people she once trusted but could no longer escape. Each message felt like it clawed at her consciousness, drawing her closer to their source. Find the letter in the attic, one text read. What letter? Marissa texted back. Sealed with a red ribbon. It holds the truth. Intrigued and terrified, Marissa found herself heading to her family home, the one place she thought might harbor secrets. The attic was dark and filled with the scent of mildew, cluttered with the remnants of childhood. In a musty corner, hidden beneath a stack of old boxes, she found a small, dust-covered envelope sealed with a faded red ribbon. Her hands shook as she opened it to find a letter written in sweeping cursive, detailing Jenna's fears and the betrayal she faced. It spoke of a group, friends turned enemies, and of a fate sealed in shadows. As she read the letter, a feeling of suffocation washed over her. The phone buzzed in her pocket, its persistent vibrations seeming to quicken the shadows around her. Are you there? Jenna's frantic message seemed to echo in the cramped space. I'm reading the letter, Marissa replied, remembering the words about a conspiracy far beyond her understanding. Did they know you have it? You have to leave. You can't trust anyone. Panic surged through her, and as she tucked the letter back into her pocket, a sound echoed from the stairs below. His footsteps were heavy and loud, crashing against the wooden staircase, moving swiftly toward the attic. Marissa's heart raced as the door creaked open, revealing a figure shrouded in darkness. Now you know too much, he hissed, his voice chilling her blood. In that instant, the phone went silent, and Jenna's presence began to fade, replaced by a dreadfully suffocating aura that closed in on Marissa. It was as if Jenna's spirit was trying to help her, warning her of the very fate that had claimed her, yet not fast enough. In an adrenaline-fueled sprint, Marissa burst past the figure and fled down the stairs, her heart pounding as she dashed for the door. Outside, the sun was setting, the golden light signaling safety, but the feeling of being hunted clawed at her insides. The last message from Jenna came in just as she reached her car. Don't look back, just keep running. Marissa drove into the night, the old phone still buzzing with chilling echoes of desperation. She glanced in the rearview mirror, hoping to see the figure receding into the darkness. But there was nothing. All she could see was the road ahead, a road shrouded in mystery, and the suffocating weight of a warning that would haunt her every step. In the end, Marissa was no longer just a woman who had bought an old phone. She had become part of a story that reached far beyond her world, tethered to a spirit desperate to escape her own fate while trying to save someone new. The old phone vibrated again as she drove into the night, leaving only echoes and unanswered questions in its wake. Let's get to another story. The Silent Village. The sun dipped low on the horizon, igniting the sky with hues of orange and purple as the Thompson family rolled into the tranquil village of Eldridge Hollow. Nestled among rolling hills and ancient trees, the village seemed to have been untouched by time. With a tired yet eager sense of adventure, they pulled off the main road into a small gravel parking area in front of a quaint, crooked inn, the Whispering Pines. As they stepped out of their minivan, the warm air prickled with an eerie stillness. It was oddly quiet, the only sounds being the rustle of leaves and the distant call of a bird. The family exchanged puzzled glances as they approached the inn's entrance. The faded sign creaked in the light breeze, but there were no cheerful voices or friendly smiles to greet them. Inside, the innkeeper, a stooped old man with deep-set eyes, nodded silently at them, his lips sealed tight. He gestured toward a dusty ledger that lay open on the counter. The Thompsons hesitated, sensing an unspoken rule hanging in the air. They filled in their names and requested a room, but the man simply pointed to a door at the back of the lobby. "Thank you." Sarah, the family's somewhat anxious teenage daughter, tried to break the silence, but her words hung in the air, swallowed by the thick tension. The innkeeper met her gaze, his eyes glimmering with a mixture of warning and sorrow before he returned to his chores without a single word. Once settled into their room, the family ventured out to explore Eldridge Hollow. Rows of quaint cottages lined the cobblestone streets, adorned with flower boxes overflowing with vibrant blooms, yet no life stirred. They passed a woman kneeling in her garden, and though she looked up, her expression was devoid of any words. Not a hello, not a smile, just silence. "This is weird," David, the ever-curious son, remarked, glancing back toward Sarah. But his mutterings were met by raised eyebrows and hushed tones from his parents, who were busy scanning their surroundings. Despite the village's undeniable charm, an unsettling air enveloped the family as they continued their exploration. As dusk began to settle, cloaking the village in shadows, they returned to the inn. At the innkeeper's urging, the family gathered around an old wooden table strewn with faded maps and books. Still, the silence weighed heavily on them like a physical presence. "Maybe we should ask him about the village," Sarah whispered, her eyes darting around, catching glimpses of unfulfilled stories buried within the walls. Her parents nodded, and Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, ready to confront the silence. "Excuse me, why does nobody speak here?" The innkeeper's eyes widened slightly, then darkened as he looked over the family. He raised a hand as if to ward off their curiosity and began to motion them to leave it be. But something flickered in his gaze: fear, concern. Instead of retreating, Mrs. Thompson leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper, "Please, what's wrong?" Suddenly, the old man's composure shifted, and with urgent gestures, he mimed a story. He pointed toward the woods that shadowed the village and drew lines in the air, illustrating a dark secret that lay just beyond the trees, something that once was seen and now could not be spoken. The Thompsons leaned in closely, hanging on to his every movement, as the innkeeper's swift motions painted a haunting picture. With his hands, he crafted the tale of a long-buried secret, an ancient underwater spirit that had once walked among them, sharing wisdom with the villagers. But an ill-fated night, one bellicose hero disturbed its slumber, awakening the spirit's wrath. In retaliation, the spirit cast a curse upon the village: "Speak of it, and suffer a fate worse than death." Henceforth, silence became their shield, guarding the villagers, but at a cost, trapping them in a perfect cage of quietude. As the innkeeper's story unfolded, the Thompsons felt a chill brush against their skin. "We have to leave. We can't stay here anymore," whispered David, his voice barely loud enough to pierce the thick silence. But Teresa, the youngest, stood firm, her eyes bright with defiance. "If they're cursed, they need our help," she said, her voice breaking the silence, and for a brief moment, a flicker of dread crossed the innkeeper's face. "Do you truly want to know?" He gestured toward an ancient tome hidden beneath the table, its cover encrusted with imagery of the spirit. The family members exchanged glances, a collective decision brewing. They nodded, and with great care, the innkeeper opened the book. As a long-forgotten chant spilled from his lips, the air around them thickened, crackling with energy. Cautiously, the Thompsons joined him, the words of protection escaping their lips, rising up against the binding shadows. As the final syllables echoed, the ground trembled, and a rush of fresh wind burst through the open window, sweeping through the stillness like wildfire. The walls shook, and a deep resonance filled the air, a sound of relief, like chains breaking. For the first time, the villagers stepped forward, their faces lit with dawning hope. With hushed but glimmering voices, they joined in a chorus, a melody echoing through Eldridge Hollow, shattering the grip of the curse. And so, as twilight faded into starlit skies, the village erupted with sound, laughter mingling with the whispers of the past. The Thompsons felt that weight lift, knowing they hadn't merely observed a forgotten tale, they'd ignited a rebirth. With heavy hearts and lighter spirits, the family said their goodbyes to Eldridge Hollow. The villagers stood outside their inn, voices raised in a harmony of freedom, a reminder that sometimes, secrets should be shared, and silence can be the heaviest curse of all. Let's get to another story. The night train. It was a stormy night when Victor Lane boarded the last train leaving the city. The heavy downpour danced upon the platform, a cacophony of raindrops colliding with metal and concrete, while the dim light of the station flickered with each gust of wind. He gripped his briefcase under his arm and cast a final glance at the city skyline, which seemed to dissolve into the darkness. Business had been draining. Endless meetings, unending negotiations, and he longed for the comfort of home. As the train jolted forward, Victor settled into his seat. The interior smelled faintly of stale coffee and overused upholstery. He sighed, letting the rhythmic clatter of wheels on tracks dull the stress of his day. The only other sound was the soft hum of conversation from the cars ahead. But as the train slid deeper into the night, Victor noticed something strange. Each car he passed held passengers who looked astonishingly like faces from his past, faces he hadn't thought of in years. In the first car, an elderly man sat by the window, peering out at the rain, his white hair and round glasses reminiscent of Mr. Thompson, his fifth-grade teacher, whose encouraging words had sparked Victor's early ambition. The man turned, a faint smile pulling at his lips, but Victor quickly averted his gaze, uneasy. In the next car, a pair of laughing teenagers crowded together, someone with a messy shock of black hair and a bright smile, a ghost of his youth. It was Jenna, his childhood crush. Memories flooded in, playing tag in the summer sun, crushing on her from a distance. She glanced towards him, her laughter echoing like music all around, but Victor quickened his pace, an inexplicable chill creeping up his spine. With each passing car, more specters appeared. His college roommate, Carlos, who had died tragically in a car accident, his first girlfriend, Lisa, whose face, once vibrant and full of life, looked worn and weary, and even his beloved grandmother, who had passed while he was away on a business trip, now knitting quietly, her eyes glistening with unspent love. Victor's heart raced as curiosity pulled him into the next car. Each of these ghostly figures seemed unaware of his presence, yet the air thickened with personal history and unresolved emotions. He wanted to call out, to reach out, to beg for the chance to talk, but the words caught in his throat. "Why are you here?" he whispered to himself, half expecting an answer. The train rocked as it continued its relentless journey, but the atmosphere shifted with each step forward. Shadows danced in the dim light, and the familiar faces morphed into blurred reflections of regret. Victor stepped into the last car, a space that felt different, as if the very fabric of reality held its breath. The passengers here were enveloped in a strange stillness, their expressions tight with anticipation. At the front of the car stood a figure cloaked in darkness, its back turned to him. Victor felt an instinctual pull towards it, a deep-rooted need to uncover the mystery of his situation. As he approached, the figure turned, revealing a face both familiar and esoteric, a mirror of his own visage, aged and somber, filled with lines of lost dreams and unmade decisions. "Welcome, Victor," said the doppelganger, voice echoing with the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. "You've journeyed long, but you must realize, it's time to confront your past. This train is a conduit, a final destination for your regrets." He stumbled backward, memories of choices flooded his mind, risks taken, chances lost, people hurt in the pursuit of success. "I can't change what's done," he stammered, the truth clawing in his throat. "I don't want to face them." "You must, for they're part of you," the figure insisted, stepping forth to bridge the gap. "Only by facing the pain can you find peace. Each car is a chapter of your life, a lesson that will lead you forward." Victor hesitated, grappling with the weight of his choices. The train lurched again, but the shadows of his past seemed to beckon him. He felt his heart drum in synchrony with the wheels on the tracks, urging him to step closer, to embrace the ghosts he had avoided for so long. With a shuddering breath, he walked back down the aisle, past Mr. Thompson, Jenna, Carlos, Lisa, and his grandmother. He no longer saw them as figments of nostalgia but as parts of himself, integral lessons stitched into the fabric of his being. As the train slowed, he felt a sense of calm envelop him, intertwining with the flowing sorrow. Victor closed his eyes and whispered words he ought to have said long ago. "I'm sorry, and thank you." When he opened them, the train had come to a gentle stop. The doors creaked open, revealing a world bathed in dawn's first light, soft and promising. The storm had passed, and with it, the weight of unresolved past. Victor stepped off the train, a renewed man, a businessman with scars healed by acceptance. The paths ahead were bright with possibility, illuminated by the truth he had embraced. Let's get to another story. The other side of the wall. Tyler had never believed in the extraordinary. His life was a cycle of school, homework, and weekends spent binge-watching shows. At 15, he felt more like a spectator than a participant, trapped in a world he didn't quite fit into. One dreary afternoon, as rain pattered against his window, he slumped against the wall in his cramped bedroom, absent-mindedly scratching at the peeling paint. That's when he noticed it, a tiny hole, barely the size of a dime, hidden among the tangle of old posters and textbooks. Curiosity ignited within him as he leaned in closer. What's behind there? He thought, his heart racing with the thrill of discovery. Peering through the small opening, Tyler's breath hitched as he found himself staring into a dimly lit room that mirrored his own but felt distinctly wrong. The colors were darker, shadows clinging to the corners, and an unsettling feeling washed over him. This version of his bedroom was cluttered with chaos. Crumpled papers, dusty trophies, and an ominous dark mirror that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. As he inspected the bizarre reflection, Tyler's eyes widened in disbelief. There, standing in this eerie space, was a version of himself. The boy had the same tousled brown hair, the same wide blue eyes, but his expression was twisted, wretched, angry, and yet enthralled. This other self's eyes burned not with the flicker of life, but a cold, unyielding fire. "Who are you?" Tyler whispered, half expecting an answer. The mirror figure merely stood, observing him with an intensity that sent shivers down his spine. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, his alternate self mirrored his actions, leaning closer to the hole and gazing straight back at him. A chill gripped Tyler's heart as he felt an unspeakable connection, a tether pulled taut between two lives. Suddenly, the boy smiled. It wasn't an innocent smile but a predator's grin that revealed hidden teeth. "You could be so much more," the other boy said, his voice slithering through the hole like fog. "In here, there are no rules. No expectations. Imagine feeling alive." "What do you mean?" Tyler stammered, a mix of fear and curiosity. "What are you talking about?" He leaned even closer, the hole framing their dual realities. "I want to trade," the mirror boy said, his voice now low and coaxing. "You can live in my world, you'll be free. No more hiding, no more being unheard." Tyler's heart raced. This was beyond anything he had ever faced, a terrifying yet tantalizing thought. Inside him, a surge of rebellion flickered. He had never felt truly alive. Could this twisted counterpart hold the key to that very freedom? "You don't know what it's like here," Tyler protested, suddenly aware of the weight of his words. "I might not have it easy, but this is my life, the good and the bad. I can't just trade it for whatever you have." The dark version of himself chuckled, the sound echoing through the small space. "Oh, but you'd be amazed. Here, I am the master of my destiny. I've claimed everything. Friends, power, control. Don't you want that?" Images began to bombard Tyler's mind. The agony of rejection, the relentless wave of social expectations, the pressure of grades. He felt like a ghost floating through the halls of high school, unseen and unheard. The darkness beckoned, promising escape. "What if I said yes?" Tyler said, the words slipping out before he could grasp their weight. "What would you give me?" The shadowy figure leaned back, a glint of excitement igniting his eyes. "Your identity, your likeness, and the world beyond that wall. All I need is your compassion and your light. It's a fair trade, don't you think?" Tyler felt the walls of his reality closing in, the weight of his decisions looming overhead. Desperation clawed at his insides. Did he really want to cast away who he was in exchange for the thrill of what could be? In that moment, he glanced back into his room, the familiar haven that, despite its clutter, held all memories of laughter, pain, and fleeting joy. It might be mundane, but it was his. The boy on the other side, with his dark ambitions and twisted yearnings, couldn't possibly understand the richness of life forged in imperfection. "No," Tyler finally said, his voice steady, "I won't trade with you." The mirror image recoiled, rage flickering across his face. "You don't know what you're throwing away." he snarled. You will remain trapped forever. But Tyler felt something shift within him, courage igniting like wildfire. Maybe it's you who is trapped, he shot back. In a world where you think being ruthless makes you powerful, I choose to be me. With that, he pulled away from the hole, heart pounding with defiance. But a whisper lingered in the air, the resentment and hunger of his alternate self echoing back through the wall. Days turned into weeks, a quiet resolve growing in Tyler's heart. He had faced darkness and won. He began to fill his world with the colors he had always wished for, reaching out to friends, forging connections, and embracing the messy beauty of life. Yet, on lonely nights, he could sometimes feel the pulse of that dark mirror, the temptation lingering just beyond his reach, a reminder of the choices he made. And in the depths of silence, a voice would whisper, "You could still join me." But Tyler smiled to himself, content with the light he had chosen. Each day was a battle, but it was his battle, and that was more than enough. Let's get to another story. The Garden of Shadows. In a sleepy coastal town, secluded by thick woods and shrouded in mist, an old cottage sat at the edge of a winding cliff. It belonged to Dr. Harold Cresswell, a retired botanist whose once celebrated career at the university had been overshadowed by years of solitude and the faint clinking of his tea set. With a head full of wild curls and an ever-present, wistful smile, he had spent his time tending to a modest garden, gathering herbs and petals for herbal teas, hoping they would soothe his restless soul. The day had a pallid light, as if the sun was hesitant to shine through the gray clouds. Harold was clearing out the unruly weeds when he stumbled upon a wooden gate, half hidden beneath a vine of overgrown roses. Intrigued, he pulled the thorny tendrils away and pushed the creaking gate open. What lay beyond was unlike anything he had ever seen, a hidden garden, vibrant and lush, bursting with colors that seemed to breathe in the muted light. In the center of the garden stood an ancient oak tree, gnarled and majestic, its branches twisting like arthritic fingers reaching toward heaven. Surrounding the tree were plants he had never encountered before, glowing ferns, luminescent blossoms, and tendrils that cascaded like waterfalls. The air thrummed with an energy he could almost taste, but it was not the plants themselves that drew him in. It was the whispers. As Harold stepped farther into the garden, leaning down to examine the delicate petals of a violet flower, he heard them clearer, a soft chorus of hushed voices riding the breeze. "Help us," they seemed to chant, "remember us." His heart raced. Could this be some trick of the wind? Uncertainty tinged with exhilaration filled him as he began to catalog the flowers, noting their vibrant hues, unusual shapes, and delicate filaments. He shifted his attention from plant to plant, captivated by their ghostly murmurs that seemed to resonate within the depths of his mind. Days turned into weeks. Each time he returned, new secrets emerged from the garden's depths. He began to create a sketchbook filled with illustrations, dedicating his time to understanding the plant's unique properties. But the whispers grew stronger, more insistent, layering his thoughts with a heaviness that he could no longer push aside. Then, one cloudy afternoon, he crouched to examine a twist of ivy draping over a stone. He noticed something strange beneath the foliage, a rough-hewn stone tablet etched with names long forgotten. With a sudden jolt, he realized these were the names of people who had been reported missing from the town over decades. The soft whispers turned frantic, and he understood at last. The plants themselves were the souls of those who had vanished, ensnared within the garden's enchanted grasp. Panic erupted within him, and he stumbled back, horror washing over his face. Each flower, each leaf, was a life extinguished, forever imprisoned in this place. The garden had lured him in, seduced him with its beauty, while feeding off the spirits of those it had claimed. The truth clawed at him. He had unwittingly cultivated the very essence of despair. Frantic, he turned to leave, but the roots of the oak tree flexed and writhed, forming a barrier that blocked his escape. The voices crescendoed in a cacophony of sorrow and anguish. "Do not forsake us," they begged, echoing through the air like a distant storm. "Join us." With trembling hands, Harold fought against the vines weaving around his legs. He grasped the sketchbook tightly, the only tangible remnant of his failed discoveries. The weight of the accusations felt too heavy, but he had to break free, he had to warn the townsfolk. Desperately, he tore himself from the grip of the vine and sprinted back toward the gate, but a tendril of ivy lashed out, wrapping around his ankle and pulling him back. In that moment, As he faced the twisted beauty of the hidden garden, his heart sank. He could feel them pulling at him, trying to dissuade him from uncovering their fate. But the truth was his only salvation. "Stay," they whispered. "You belong here," but he fought against their cries, the memory of each name etched into his mind. He broke through the gate just as the sun broke through the broom. The once enticing paradise fell silent behind him, the whispers dissolving like winter fog under the sun's touch. Harold ran down the winding path to the cottage, his heart pounding, a grave weight in his chest. He would gather the town, share the horrific truth, but even then, doubts loomed like shadows. Would they believe him? Would they dare to confront the evil lurking in that enchanted garden? Forever in his mind echoed the plant's whisper, a haunting reminder of the lives he could not save. The hidden garden would stay behind the gate, veiled by the forest, and the souls within would continue to call out for release. But now, the burden of truth lay heavy in his heart as he prepared for the battle against the sinister beauty of the whispering plants, a garden that thrived on forgotten despair. As dusk fell, he stood resolute, knowing the choice was his, to rescue those lost or succumb to the siren call of the garden's embrace. Thank you for watching and subscribe for more horror stories.